If you are ever out on a chilly, cold, blustery late October evening and you hear the wind whispering through the dying leaves of the trees, listen for the voice that says, Tamanaco, Tamanaco, Tamanaco. Hi, everyone. Thank you for being with me here on this chilly October evening. My name is White Cross, and I will be your guide on this spooktacular, spooky, creepy episode of White Cross Precious Metals and Numismatics. I thought this would be an excellent opportunity for us to have kind of a golden ghost story, so bear with me and reap the consequences. If you are new to the channel, I want to thank you for being with me here on this cold evening. If you are one of my returning subscribers, thank you guys, as always, for being with me on this journey. This promises to be kind of a fun little Halloween-inspired show and tell of a beautiful but gory and fantastically creepy solid gold coin. If you are new to the channel, I like to begin each of my videos with a simple disclaimer. I am not a financial advisor. I'm not trying to offer you any kind of financial advice. I'm simply trying to share with you some of my experiences having bought and sold precious metals and rare coins for the last 30 or 40 years. And if you are new to the channel, I like to bring in a term or a subject that we can kind of fold back into the area that we're studying. Tonight's phrase that we're going to be looking at is a Spanish one, and my Spanish pronunciation is not great, but it's this word here, caciques. Cacique simply means chief or chieftain, and in this case it means chief of the indigenous tribes that were in the area of what we now think of as Venezuela during the time of Spanish colonialism. If you remember a few months back, I posted a video of a coin that I was able to purchase with a small jackpot that I won at Vidara, actually Aria, in Las Vegas over the summer. I was stupid enough to sit down at a slot machine while the rest of my family was getting some gelato. I put a $100 bill into a slot machine, and on the second or third try, lo and behold, I won a jackpot of about $2,700. I don't advocate gambling. I think it's a really dumb thing to do. I don't do it very often myself. It was a stupid thing for me to have done, but sometimes the stupid actually works. And in this case, I walked away with the $2,700 jackpot. Actually, I put a $100 bill back in and lost, so I walked away with about $2,600. But I thought it would be interesting for me to use that money to buy a kind of a nice trophy coin. Since that money was kind of free money, I figured I could build my stack, and it just so happened that I was kind of reallocating my ratio of gold to silver to platinum anyway. So I took the opportunity to research a series that I have been slowly collecting over the last several years. I tend to buy gold and silver pieces at this point in my stacking history that tell a story. I'm not so interested in just common maple leafs or eagles, be they gold or silver. I'm really interested in things that have a little bit of historical interest, that tell a story, that pieces that are unique or unusual. And in this case, I have been slowly accumulating a series that was issued in Venezuela in the mid-1950s. This is the coin that I bought with the money that I won at that jackpot slot machine. So it's a 1955 series. These are from Venezuela. They are monetized as a 60 bolivar. You see that here on this NGC slab. Bolivar is the currency used and still used to this day in Venezuela. This is from a series where a collective of historians, authors, and artists got together and decided to kind of commemorate or honor the chiefs of some of these indigenous tribes that fought against the Spaniards during colonialization. Antonio Reyes, you see here his name on this book, was one of the authors behind it. And one of the most important artists of Venezuela is a man named Pedro Centino Vallenea. He also designed much of the artwork that you see on this series, about 20 pieces in total. Unfortunately, we don't really know what the mintage was of these 20 pieces. I suspect they were probably not that many of them made in the first place. Gun to my head, I would probably estimate fewer than 100 of them survive today. 1955 was more than half a century ago. So these pieces that probably were never made in large numbers in the first place, certainly not that many of them left at this point. This piece honoring a female chieftain, a female Kikakwe, probably a different name for the female version of that, but her name was Uramare, and she is kind of a folk hero for women in this part of the world. Somebody that stood up against Spanish rule. She eventually kind of started negotiation with the Spaniards, realized that diplomacy probably a better path than outright war. She's still revered and respected in that part of the world, but I think it was just a beautiful piece. This is a stunning example of this series. Again, about 20 pieces in this series. These pieces, 22 grams of 900 fine gold. So these are more than half an ounce of pure of 900 gold. But if you look at the percentage, it's 20 grams of pure gold. So 22 grams of 900 gold, and it says 20 grams of pure gold down here at the very bottom. 1955, the year that these came out, they were restruck, I believe, in 1957, and then some were restruck in 1960, and those have a different reverse, a different back than the pieces from the original 1955 series. And they also made smaller versions of them. These are 60 bolivares. I think that they released 20 bolivari at 4.5 grams, and they even released these really tiny little pieces here. This is an example of this really small one. 1.5 grams of gold. So you can see just how tiny this piece is compared to the full 22 gram, 900 or 20 gram pure gold coin. Quite small. The smaller ones seem to be available a little bit more frequently. The slightly larger ones, those 4.5 gram sizes, they're not difficult to find if you look for them. The larger ones, especially these ones from the earliest mintings, the 1955, seem to be quite scarce. So why am I telling you all of this about this horrible, spooky, ghost story kind of solid gold video? I have an example that is one of the most horrifying images that I've ever seen on a coin, gold, silver, or otherwise, in my roughly 50 years of being a coin collector, and that's what we're talking about on this spooky Halloween-inspired video. There was one of these chieftains, one of these Caciques. His name was Tamanaco. And if you hear his name whispering through the trees on these cold October nights, now you're going to find out why. Tamanaco, one of the most famous of these Caciques, one of the most famous of these chieftains that fought against the Spanish, and he was actually quite successful. He was such a good guerrilla soldier that Spain had to try to find reinforcements from all over the Caribbean and all the way back to Europe just to try to finally find this guy. He was harassing the Spanish settlements and was doing a pretty good job of it, so much so that they needed reinforcements. And after several close call battles with Tamanaco, he was pretty badly injured, but he had attacked Caracas, kind of the capital of this area of the Spanish rule. And it looked like that he was actually going to be successful. He was going to take out the Spaniards. And they pulled a surprise trick where they sent in cavalry. And these were armored people on horseback. And the indigenous tribes had no way really to fight against that. And Tamanaco was pretty badly injured, and they were finally surrounded, and they captured him. The Spanish captured him. So this happened, I believe, sometime in the early 1500s. And the Spaniards, kind of notorious for their cruelty towards the indigenous people during this period of time, offered Tamanaco a choice. They would either hang him by the neck until dead, or he could face mortal combat. In other words, fight for his life. Now, who knows if the Spaniards would have actually spared his life had he won in this gruesome, terrifying, mortal hand-to-hand combat. And it turns out that Tamanaco was not going to be fighting against one of his fellow indigenous fighters, and he wasn't going to be fighting against the Spanish. Instead, he was going to be fighting against an enormous fighting dog. In this case, it was a mastiff. If you've ever seen a mastiff, they're called Mastin Español in Spanish. These are huge, massive, powerful dogs with enormous skulls and a massive bite. Mastiffs had been bred in Spain for as long as 2,000 years to kind of make them into these terrifying fighting dogs that guarded livestock. And these fighting mastiffs were known to have gone up against entire packs of wolves and even bears. That's how massive and terrorizing these animals could be. And one of the men who was kind of responsible for the this area of the capital of Caracas happened to have a huge fighting mastiff, ironically named Amigo, which in Spanish means friend. He clearly was not going to be a friend to Tamanaco. So Tamanaco proclaimed, at least in the legend of Tamanaco, he proclaimed that he was going to win against this huge fighting mastiff, even though he himself was injured. And he proclaimed that the Spaniards would finally understand the meaning of cruelty. So an area was cordoned off. Tamanaco was led into it, and then they released Amigo into this area. And by all accounts, the fight was really, really gruesome. And in fact, at the end of the fight, Tamanaco's head was ripped completely from his body. I told you this was going to be a spooky story, and this is a pretty gruesome coin. From this series, you've seen some of the beautiful images of these chieftains, and your first instinct might be that this is pretty horrifying. I'd agree with you. That's Tamanaco with his head ripped off. Look at the gore dripping from beneath his throat, severed by the jaws of this huge fighting mastiff named Amigo. So this is actually the way that Tamanaco is remembered by the people in this area, and this isn't really considered something bad. This shows that he was no coward. He was willing to fight and die for what he believed in. Still, this is a mid-century modern design ethic or standard. Clearly, you can see that in some of these other pieces. These are unusual designs. You wouldn't see these probably on American coinage of this period of time. There is almost a surrealist attempt at portraying these individuals. Of course, we don't have photographs of these people. These are stylized images, and they're supposed to portray these caciques as being strong and fierce and noble. But to see this picture of Tamanaco with his head just ripped from his body is pretty horrifying, especially when you consider that this is a big, solid gold coin. This wasn't a little metal medallion made of pot metal or aluminum. This was an impressive, solid gold thing that was supposed to mean something, and I think it does. This is a particularly gruesome image on a coin, one of the most fearsome images that I have ever seen. But again, this is how the people of this region remember him. Tamanaco became a folk hero, and he is revered to this day by people in this area, particularly Venezuelans, and the people that seem to have a connection with those indigenous tribes. They remember him this way, not because it's a bad thing, but because it showed how fierce he was, how willing he was to stand up for what he thought he was right, what he thought was correct. And this is how he is remembered by these people even to this day. His name, shouted as Venezuelans go into battle or to face an enemy, be it political or otherwise, kind of the same way that we would think of somebody like Davy Crockett, and we would think, remember the Alamo, that kind of thing. It's kind of the same idea for people in this part of the world. This is how they see Tamanaco, and that's how they remember Tamanaco. So, how is that for a spooky, solid gold ghost story on this cold, frigid, dark, dreary, rainy October evening? You've seen the legend of Tamanaco. You've seen that horrible visage of him on this solid gold coin with the gore dripping from his severed neck. It's a pretty gruesome thing to see, but you have to admit it's an unusual thing to see, and in solid gold it is a pretty impressive thing to see. If you have any interest in the rest of this series, leave a comment down below. I haven't decided if I'll do an entire video of these pieces yet. I don't have quite the entire collection yet, but I think it's particularly interesting to see the kind of a relationship between 1955 solid gold pieces from Venezuela and the problems that Venezuela has been having for the last 15 or 20 years. If you look at global news headlines, you'll see Venezuela suffered through some periods of inflation and probably even hyperinflation. I think some Venezuelans were able to get their hands on gold, and clearly they have a connection with gold if you're looking at these pieces here before you. And that gold has helped ensure some people in Venezuela, has ensured their livelihoods, have ensured their safety. And I think it's a great thing to remember that gold often, not always, but often can be at least some protection against things like inflation and hyperinflation. Interesting idea for a video series. Let me know if you'd like to have me dive deeper into that one. If you have any questions about this series, by all means, leave a comment down below and I'll try to address it if I can. If you have suggestions for any other series in numismatics, precious metal stacking, leave a comment down below and I'll check and see if I've got the knowledge base and the examples so we can maybe pursue that question that you're asking. And as always, thank you for allowing me to be a part of your journey as you go deeper into the world of coins and physical precious metals.